Everyone loves a good bad guy, but what happens when your bad guy is so good you no longer want the protagonist to win? A gnawing sense of dissatisfaction and list features like this one apparently. In this video we'll be celebrating the cackling antagonists who outshine their boring nemeses, the maniacal masterminds who maybe, just maybe, weren't so bad after all. So stroke your white cat, start the unnecessarily slow moving dipping mechanism and join us as we scowl menacingly at 8 times in games we wanted the villain to win.
You dangerous, mute lunatic.
Do you have your hidden blade, your Spider-Man-like climbing skills, eagle vision that's probably really helpful for finding your phone? Well, so does Haytham Kenway. He's one of those Templars that all the assassins have been warning you about for years, and we love him for it. For the first time, Assassin's Creed 3 let us see the world through Templar eyes, as we spent the first 4 hours or so running around as Connor's James Bond-talking aristocrat father.
I won't ask again.
And while Ubi kept the fact we were playing as the bad guys under wraps until the sequence was over, the damage was already done. Not only is Haytham Kenway a shining beacon of charisma, especially in comparison to his painfully sincere son, he's also a fascinating glimpse into the Templar world. He only murders people so he can complete his quest to find a precursor site in North America. He cares deeply for the morally grey soup that exists between the assassins and the Templars. And sadly, this all means that by the time we get to running through the frontier as Connor, with Haytham on the wall with a giant kill sign over his head, we'd probably rather be on the Darth Vader side of this equation. Oh, and he's really good in a fight as well. On the face of it, Pagan Min is a maniacal dictator, best remembered for being a less impressive echo of Far Cry 3's Vars. But he's actually a complex, nuanced character and maybe the best choice for the troubled Himalayan country of Kyrat. It's not an excuse for his more vicious behaviour, but he did have a bad start in life. Born into drugs, knowing nothing but a life of crime. And as most people know, if you wait for him to return at the start of the game, you spread your mother's ashes together and he hands the rule of Kyrat over to you. However, if you step out and embrace the chaos of Far Cry 4, you're left with 2 far less palatable options at the end of the game. Sabal, who establishes a fundamentalist state, or Anita, a totalitarian leader who uses child soldiers to protect her drug fields. Compared with them, Min seems like the lesser of 3 evils. And also, how can you not want him to win when he's dressed like this?
Awesome.
This is a Metal Gear entry, so it's going to be so complicated that you'll probably reach the end not knowing if we were right or wrong. But trust us, despite the murder, torture, nuclear weapons and obviously villainous mustache, Revolver Ocelot is working for what he sees as the greater good. Anyone who remembers Ocelot from Metal Gear Solid will see him as a gunslinging second in command and the guy responsible for torturing Snake. So far, so evil. But he's actually a triple agent who spent his entire life playing different powers off against each other, with the intention of freeing humanity from the global war economy. It would take a whole video to explain exactly how he does it. It involves AIs, arm grafts and possession, but trust us when we say that Ocelot's heart is mostly in the right place. The ultimate fruition of his plans usually ends with the world being plunged into anarchy, but in Ocelot's eyes, that's better than an existence of blind obedience. Think of him like Neo, but with a mullet and a soup strainer.
Now we'll see if the man can live up to the legend.
Darth Traya from the interesting but sadly unfinished Knights of the Old Republic 2 seems far more relevant after The Last Jedi. Similar to Luke, she's become disillusioned with the Jedi, but Traya takes it so far she's actually at war with the Force itself. As you can probably guess from her name, she's not all good, but she ultimately ends up expelled from both the light and dark sides of the Force. She breaks both Sith and Jedi rules and looks upon the player's actions in a far more thoughtful and complex way than most mentors. She's more interested in consequences than she is with the simple distinction between good and bad, and that makes her fascinating. The simplified version makes it look like she's all about Jedi purges and turning people to the dark side, but in reality, Traya craves balance, and she recognises that slavish devotion to the light or dark can have negative consequences.
I sense there is a disturbance in the camp.
Hang on a minute, are we really saying that we want the rusted, blood-caked manifestation of James Sunderland's repressed desires in Silent Hill 2 to win? Well, yes. Sort of. When you're playing Silent Hill 2, you're motivated to keep fighting through curiosity and horror. There's no way you're going to let Pyramid Head get you because he's a walking nightmare. But when you analyse what James has done and why he's trapped in Silent Hill, you can't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, he deserves to be pursued, menaced and ultimately destroyed by an 8-foot metal phallus. But assuming you beat Pyramid Head and earn one of the good endings, James gets away with smothering his terminally ill wife while lusting after the nurses who are caring for her. And perhaps, depending on how you play, even starts a new life with her look-alike that probably won't end very well.
You killed me, and you're suffering for it.
Technically, having GLADOS win Portal would involve you being incinerated. And if nothing else, that would be an unsatisfying way to cut short an incredible game, even if it did mean joining your weighted companion cube in the Aperture Science Afterlife Lounge. But even after the lies and the traps and the increasingly impossible puzzles, GLADOS remains one of our favourite video game frenemies. She's a caustically funny, inventively cruel presence throughout all of Valve's classic puzzler, and gradually uncovering her motivation over the course of 2 games is a delight. And while it's certainly amazing to finally see sunlight at the end of Portal, you can't help but treasure some of those great times you spent together. Which is a good job, considering the implication of the patched ending. On top of this, again, she's quite a sympathetic villain. There are hints throughout Portal 2 suggesting that parts of Caroline's essence have remained preserved inside GLADOS, even if GLADOS subsequently deletes them.
Goodbye, Carolyn.
And best of all, she even gives your companion cube back at the end of the game, essentially completing GLADOS's face turn. Like some other entries on this list, we have to begin with a bit of a caveat. No, Alma isn't exactly good. She's a blood-splattering ghost girl who haunts the player in the first Fear game and does some deeply questionable things as an adult spook in the second. We literally can't show you, read the Wikipedia page. But you have to remember that Alma is a victim. She never asked for her powers, and she spent a traumatic childhood being experimented on by her own dad. Alma's mother dies during her birth, and she's left to rot after being used to breed augmented super soldiers. Suddenly, you begin to understand why she's rather upset, but it gets even more heartbreaking. In the first Fear game, your character, Point Man, is technically her son, so there's a chance all those spectral encounters and grabby hands are actually Alma's way of reaching out to you as a mother. But the complication here is that everyone she touches dies, meaning Alma can never even embrace the child that was stolen from her. Some of the entries on this list involve bad guys that aren't really bad at all. Others, like Handsome Jack, are villains who are somehow still likeable despite being mouthy, exploitative, narcissistic psychopaths. You build a connection with Jack because he's a constant presence in Borderlands 2. He tracks the player's actions and communicates with you throughout the game. As he does so, you learn a bit more about him and his miserable backstory, a twisted tale of familial abuse and personal failure. And Jack is also responsible for the only locations on Pandora that even slightly resemble civilized society, Lynchwood and Opportunity, suggesting that maybe, on some small level, he does have the interests of the population at heart. He's certainly not a good guy, but there's something compelling about such a complex and challenging antagonist.
Is Handsome Jack your hero?
And that's your lot. While we retreat back to our subterranean volcano lair, you can let us know which bad guys in games you found yourself secretly rooting for. Please drop us a like if anything in this video made you feel deliciously evil, and subscribe to Logitech G for more weekly shows and features.